This is another what if that, you have to think, well, is it a case of Hitler has to not be Hitler for this to happen? Who knows? But perhaps if he could have been advised to, or maybe one of his subordinates had taken the initiative, they could have issued a proper peace proposal to Britain. This would have made it much easier for the appeasers in the British government to make their peace proposals. They definitely wanted to do this, and they even threatened the Churchill and the other members of the cabinet that they were going to do it. But they didn't actually have any real idea what it is that Germany wanted, or was, even assuming that anybody was going to accept any promises from Germany after what had happened to them before. They still didn't know what exactly Germany would want in exchange for peace. It was hard to conduct peace negotiations when none were occurring. One possibility that's very unlikely, of course, the Germans started thinking about amphibious operations in the World War I when they invaded the Baltic Islands in Operation Albion. And after that, they saw that there was a need for landing craft. They built some landing craft for that operation. They were just unpowered horse barges, horse landing craft rather. They slowly and without any enthusiasm built some landing craft. The army built one that was called the Pioneer Landingsboot, and the Navy built one called the Marine Fire Pram. By the time of the proposed invasion, there was only at the most one of each available. If they had, for instance, started preparations for the invasion earlier, perhaps they would have had more built. And if previous to the war starting, they'd sort of thought more about the fact that they were going to go to war with Britain, and that would probably involve some sort of invasion, that some sort of landing craft might be a result. Apparently, when the war started, the song "We Go Against England" was playing from German loudspeakers along the shoreline in some places. The popular idea was that, yes, we were going to attack Britain. Well, if somebody had thought that a bit more about that, they would have said, well, let's build these more of these interesting landing craft which can be transported by rail, and were transported by rail to the Black Sea and to the Mediterranean, and used on the Baltic as well. Navy design, the MFP, was an especially successful design, and the proposal was to build 500 landing craft for the May 1941 invasion, which is what the Navy wanted. So finally, let's discuss some more outlandish or not so outlandish technical advances that would have helped bring the invasion about. And number one, of course, is drop tanks. The Germans had drop tanks in 1940, but they weren't any good. If they put a little more thought into the idea, they would come up with a better design, and that would have had a huge effect on the Battle of Britain, where the fighters only had a few minutes of flight time by the time they got to London before they had to turn back. Helicopters, you say? What? Yes, the Germans had them in 1940. But, of course, one of the problems with helicopters is nobody knew what to do with them. And it wasn't really until the Vietnam War that they used them to drop troops behind enemy lines. And but prior to that, they were mainly used for rescue operations, particularly air-sea rescue. But if somebody had thought about it, they could perhaps have come up with better ideas about what to do with them. Later in the war, helicopters were issued to the mountain troops, and they used them to actually transport artillery and some mountain troops. And the helicopter, it was actually a German helicopter that was first to fly across the channel after the war ended. It was one of these, their largest types. Another long shot would have been to redesign the Heinkel 177 heavy bomber. It had 4 engines, but they were in 2 nacelles, and this caused the engines to overheat and catch fire. And the reason they did this was to make it faster. So it was quite a fast bomber, but they could have redesigned it, and they did end up redesigning it so that they didn't catch fire so often. Simplest solution would have been give it 4 nacelles. And that obviously would have helped with the Battle of Britain, since they weren't using any heavy bombers really in that campaign. Another interesting possibility is that when the Germans released the magnetic mines in 1940, they didn't have very many of them. And of course, one of them ended up on the mudflats near the River Thames, and was able to be defused, and they were able to work out countermeasures pretty quickly. So, the British probably knew that magnetic mines were coming, but until they actually had one, then devising countermeasures wasn't urgent. So what they could have done is kept the magnetic mines and built them up till they had a large number of magnetic mines, and also only deployed them when they were building all the minefields for Operation Sealion. And this would have massively improved the effectiveness of those minefields, because when the magnetic mines were deployed, they were quite effective. The only reason they weren't more effective is just that they had too few of them. And also, of course, they then deployed countermeasures, and they had to try something else. And one non-technical thing is it's possible that they didn't do some of the crazy things they did in Holland, like trying to land the transport planes on the beaches. And so maybe they would have had fewer transport losses, and that would have enabled more paratroops to be transport more quickly in the Operation Sealion. Another technical challenge was the construction of the FW-190, which was ahead of all other British fighters at the time it came out. It had engine troubles. Well, maybe they devoted a bit more effort to it. They could have come out in 1940 instead of 1941. And that would have affected Sealion in terms of air superiority. This is something that most people don't know about, is that the fact the Germans did have their own funnies of various types. They had flamethrower vehicles included in the assault waves, as well as amphibious tanks. In the second wave, they had other engineer vehicles, and perhaps those could have been moved to the first wave. These included the Ladungsläger 1, which was a Panzer 1 equipped to drop an explosive charge on the target before retreating and detonating it. Of course, Panzer 1 had only 7mm of armor or something ridiculous, so it had armor that was immune to maybe a machine gun if you're lucky. Using that to go closely up to a pillbox and drop an explosive charge in front of it, maybe not such a good idea. But they had a Panzer II version as well. Of course, I can't work out how it worked, whether they actually had to back up or they dropped the charge over the top of it had like a crane on the back. Not sure exactly how it worked, but anyway, they did have lots of these vehicles. Other engineer vehicles were simply Panzer 1s with the turrets removed, And they also had the Sonderkraftfahrzeuge 7, which was a engineer version of the 251 half-track. But they also had mine-clearing vehicles, including the Borgward Minenraumwagen, which was actually radio-controlled and a track vehicle with some armour on it. It was designed to tow mine-clearing rollers. And there was also one that had a detachable charge that could be dropped from the front of it. And it was proposed to produce 100 BE-2 vehicles starting in July of 1940. And 2 of them could be steered at one time by one armoured command vehicle. And they had a huge explosive charge of 515 kilograms. The other types of engineer vehicles were the bridge layers and bridge ladders, and they were Panzer II, Panzer IV, which could drop ladders in front of them or actual bridges.